what do you think that this Belt and Road Initiative, which was started by China years ago, what was the actually purpose of that project?
Because China needs to diversify outlets for trade, for communication with other parts of the world, and not be limited to the sea.
There will be some parallel platforms as well for the countries to grow economically, taking the example of China.
The Belt and Road Initiative has created is a model, a successful model with success stories for how cooperation and relations among nations should be, in contrast to the previous or current system we have in the world.
What initiatives can Pakistan take to preserve and get the maximum benefit?
But you cannot wait to solve the security problems to start building your economy. Therefore, you have to build supply chains and production inside Pakistan.
Economic reforms should be based on what agenda points?
But at the same time, you have to provide incentives for innovative and daring private entrepreneur, people who want to invest in Pakistan, come with new ideas.
This war changed the scenario of the region, especially in relation to Pakistan and India.
The superiority of Western weapons was broken. India, they have to realize one thing. They have to look at the map and find where they are. Focus on South and West Asia and Central Asia. That's why they're making enormous.
US can also rely on Pakistan in the future.
Trump is the most unpredictable leader. You cannot rely on him because he changes his mind every day. For any nation who want to have a future, they need to work with other nations who have a long-term plan. Pakistani leaders have shown a certain tendency in recent years, and they say we have to think about our country. We are open for everyone based on our national interests. Pakistan has been a very strong voice, defense of the people in Palestine. Pakistan's relation to Iran is improving.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this podcast at Public News digital platform. Today we are talking about a very important issue which is related to Pakistan's economy, as we always talk about the CPEC and its importance in the region. And then there are so many collective factors which are actually affecting the CPEC benefits in relation to Pakistan. And especially if we talk about the two important wars which recently happened in the region, like Iran and Israel war, and then Pakistan and India war. These two wars strategically changed the dynamics of the region, and obviously their impact will be showcased with the passage of time. But how Pakistan can get the maximum benefits in this scenario in relation to economic? So today we will be talking about all those points and agendas, and for this we have a very important personality who's expert on these, Mr. Hussein Askary, who's economic and strategic expert and co-founder and vice chairman of Belt and Road Institute, Sweden. Thank you so much, sir, for joining.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. So we are doing this podcast for the public news platform. It's a very a big channel on this current scenario, and we have a very huge social following as well on the social media platforms. So I'll start my discussion with that. Obviously, the institute which you had is a Belt and Road Institute. Obviously, it is related to CPEC. What importance do you think that CPEC is actually the part of the whole infrastructure or the idea which China is actually heading to? So what do you think that this Belt and Road Initiative, which was started by China years ago, what was the actually purpose of that project?
Well, I think the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is a key component of the whole Belt and Road Initiative, and one of the what is people call the flagship of the Belt and Road Initiative, because it is has created a model for cooperation between two nations with diverse political structures, different social structures, different cultural structures, different economic structures, but nonetheless they can work together for common goals, which is the core of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is that to coordinate policy of development, to finance the policy of development, to build the connectivity, which is the infrastructure necessary to revive the old Silk Road. This is the idea President Xi Jinping presented in 2013 when he launched this Belt and Road Initiative. And then, of course, to enhance trade and create people-to-people communication, which is about culture, tourism, and education. So China and Pakistan are, as it said, the Iron Brothers. They are strategic collaboration allies in an area which is of extreme importance in global politics, which is have been plagued by, of course, British geopolitics for decades and maybe centuries. And it has a very dynamic, both economic, strategic, but even military implications for the whole region. And therefore, the model of the CPEC is, which is what we call in our institute, the development corridor. The Belt and Road Initiative creates development corridors, which is centered around rivers, or if there are no rivers, on highways, railways, and around them you build power stations, you build electricity lines, you build water management systems, and new industrial and agricultural projects, and new urban centers. So this is something which is the core of this. And the CPEC represents all these elements, because you have the river, you have the power, you have the now being built, you will have the transport which is necessary, and you will have the water management system which will be necessary for agricultural development. And then you can build industrial zones around this whole corridor from the north to the south. And then this becomes also a strategic artery for China's connection to the rest of the world, because China needs to diversify its outlets for trade, for communication with other parts of the world, and not be limited to the sea, which has many geopolitical problems. Many, as we can see, the situation in South China Sea. The Malacca Strait is a big bottleneck. We have the Strait of Hormuz in the Gulf, which is another big geopolitical and economic bottleneck. So all these threats can be mitigated partially by connecting China to Pakistan, and then from Pakistan to the Arabian Sea, to Central Asia, to South Asia, hopefully with India, for example, and to Iran and the West Asia region and to Europe. So this is very, very significant, has many dimensions.
So by your conversation, I've understood that probably the initial goals of China have been achieved. So what are the future prospects which you think China is targeting, and especially the Western world response about this? I mean, we can see the shift of the power in the region to China than the other countries. So what do you think the Western world is responding in? Because we have been seeing that there are other economic corridors which are under progress, like India and Iran were working on an economic corridor. We have heard that Russia is also working on some economic corridor. So you think that there will be some parallel platforms as well for the countries to grow economically, taking the example of China?
Yeah, I think to be clear, not all the goals for the Belt and Road Initiative have been achieved completely, but it's a work in progress. What the Belt and Road Initiative has created is a model, a successful model with success stories for how cooperation and relations among nations should be, in contrast to the previous or current system we have in the world, which is based on zero-sum, games. The Chinese model is to prosper together, unite and prosper together. The old system is divide and conquer. So this is a completely new model in international relations. And then we have, of course, the first stage of the Belt and Road was to build the connectivity infrastructure to connect the roads, the cities, the ports, through railways, through roads, highways, airports, and so on and so forth, to connect as many nations together as possible to integrate their economies into this larger. And in that way, China has actually succeeded in attracting more than 150 nations to become part of this. China has built dozens of ports in Africa and other, West Asia, even in Europe. Have built railways, have built hydropower plants, as you have in China, it's under construction, to enhance economic development in all these regions and connect them together. Now, what we disagree with other people on is that other corridors, like the India, Iran, Russia corridor, the middle corridor through Central Asia and the Caspian Sea, there is no contradiction. This is people who think in zero-sum game method, because they think that there's a competition between it. There is no competition between them. There is integration of all these. It's the more infrastructure we have in Eurasia or Africa, the better. Doesn't matter who builds them. The issue is that when some ideas are manipulated, like the India, Middle East, Israel EU corridor proposed by the Biden administration 2 years ago, we see what that has led to in Gaza and Palestine with the genocide, because it's used as a tool, as a weapon to undermine other ideas. And the United States and India, they have no way of building this infrastructure. Actually, that infrastructure is being built by China in cooperation with United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and other countries in that part of the world. So instead of competing with the Belt and Road, there should be integration with the Belt and Road. And also, we have an area in West Asia, of course, all the way from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Central Asia, all the way to the Mediterranean, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and the whole Gulf and Yemen. This is a very, very tenable area for geopolitical games and wars. And the Belt and Road Initiative's role there is to stabilize and bring those nations together through economic cooperation. And this is one thing which China succeeded in, is bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia together to reconcile their relations, to rebuild their diplomatic relations and start working together. So there are these very interesting dimensions to the whole thing, which can cancel what we call geoeconomics, can cancel geopolitics.
Exactly. You gave the example of like close ties or close connection is happening between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which is obviously unexpected, but it is happening. So, what do you think that Pakistan can achieve? Because obviously we should be talking about Pakistan's perspective for the audience. So, how crucial is Pakistan for Pakistan to get success in this project? Because if we talk about terrorism, it's the biggest problem of Pakistan, especially related to our province Balochistan, which is actually having the bigger piece of CPEC track. So, what do you think that what initiatives can Pakistan take to preserve and get the maximum benefit? Obviously, China is assisting Pakistan, but the main issue we have to take care of that. I mean, on a bigger horizon, what do you think Pakistan can do actually?
Yeah, I think the one of the reasons I believe that China is investing so much in the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and it considers it as a key part of its policy, is that despite all the terrorist attacks on Chinese engineers and all the destabilization, they continue working on it. Because the Chinese believe in this idea of peace and security through economic development. To give you the example of Xinjiang, I have been in Xinjiang, the Uyghur Autonomous Region, where there's a lot of propaganda against China concerning the Muslims there. China managed to stabilize the situation not simply by security measures, but by elevating the economic and social conditions of the people in Xinjiang, the Uyghurs especially, with education, building infrastructure, employment. And the Xinjiang is one of the most developed parts of Asia, actually, right now. If people go there and see, it's enormous. There are security problems, but you cannot wait to solve the security problems to start building your economy. You should fight to build your economy, because that way you eliminate one of the core reasons for why people tend to be extremists, terrorists, or separatists, because they feel disadvantaged. Of course, there are other historical reasons and other international geopolitical reasons why there is terrorism in Pakistan and in India and in other parts of Asia, which is we call Londonistan problem. These are problems created by the old imperialist and colonialist powers, Britain, and then later in cooperation with the United States. We know the story of Afghanistan and the war in Afghanistan. But that does not mean you have to give up your economic development just because you have security problems. And the Chinese have shown that this is the primary. The idea is peace through economic development, and you should not relent. Now, Pakistan, of course, there are economic things and administrative governance issues in Pakistan, how to benefit from this China-Pakistan economic corridor and the larger Belt and Road Initiative. Because as we know, because of the lack of electricity in Pakistan, many industries had to shut down. But also, it's not enough to have assembly projects like auto part, building autos by assembling them. Because if you import, like our textile economy, I studied Sri Lanka actually. I mean, if you import all the cotton and yarn for the textile industry, if you import all the machines for your textile industry, and if you import all the fuel to run your textile industry, then what do you add to that? It's only the cheap labor you're adding. And if the fuel price goes up, your industries are in trouble. because you will not have electricity to run the machines for the textile. Or if the cotton prices go up, you also shut down. And this is something which like Sri Lanka has suffered from. So therefore, you have to build supply chains and production inside Pakistan. With the water management system being built now with the dams, it's not only for electricity, but you have to utilize that to build an irrigation system all over the country to utilize the vast lands for agricultural development. Agriculture in Pakistan has to leapfrog. They have come to high technological standards and machinery to be able to double, quadruple, and increase the agricultural production tenfold. You have enormous resources like minerals and others that you can actually utilize to become semi-independent in part of the materials you need for your industries. And so industrialization is the next phase of the Belt and Road Initiative, industrialization and modernization. When you have the infrastructure, you go to the next stage, which is the building industrial economy. Of course, you cannot compete with everyone in the world, but you have to take the advantages you have. If you have materials, if you have an educated labor force, or if you have a special geographical location, then you take advantage of these and focus on specific industries where you can become world champion or regional champion. You don't compete with everybody in everything. You choose certain strategic areas where you become world leader or regional leader in that and specialize in that. And then, of course, you have to solve the other problems. You need to have food self-sufficiency, energy self-sufficiency, and water self-sufficiency, and educate your labor force. There are other issues for like corruption, governance. These are very important issues to resolve, but I'm not in a position to discuss an internal Pakistani matter.
Oh, I understand. And I think the key issues which you have addressed, most of the issues we have already in Pakistan, like electricity issues, and obviously industrialization is a big factor which we are right now not focusing. But talking about economy, which is one of your expertise, I would like to know that what do you think that the reforms which if we consider about the economy, like every nation which is working on boosting their economy, they have to take measures about economic reforms. We are talking about the economic reforms since a few months in Pakistan, but actually what do you think that the economic reforms should be based on what agenda points?
Well, I think the first principle for any economic reform is, and I think the Chinese have a very good standard, is that because they have done economic and political reform for decades, like nobody else in the world. But there are 2-3 main principles. Is this reform policy improving the living standards of the people? Is their income increasing? Is their life quality increasing? This is what you have to think about when you do economic reform. Number 2 is the productivity of the economy is increasing when you are doing this reform. For example, we have the typical case of the state-owned companies and industries in developing nations who are complacent. They are too comfortable because if they produce a lot, if they produce less, they will get their salaries at the end of the month. They will get the investments they need at the end of the year. So that's one thing which China actually resolved. It made the state-owned companies compete with the private companies where you have a lot of innovation. And if these state-owned companies cannot compete, then they are shut down. But not at any price, because you have to try to make sure, because state-owned companies should be working for the public good. And if they are productive, that's the best solution. But if they are not productive, if you are bleeding resources to maintain these state-owned companies, then there is no need to keep them. So you have to choose the ones who are most productive and let go the others who are not productive. But at the same time, you have to provide incentives for innovative and daring private entrepreneurs, people who want to invest and build in Pakistan, come with new ideas. You have to attract capital. You have an enormous diaspora where they have financial resources. You make sure that you have funds and banks that attract this money and invest in new industrial, technological, and other projects inside Pakistan. So this is the kind of thing which I can learn from other countries, but Pakistan has very specific characteristics. The political, social, cultural structure is different than other countries. But these things which I will focus on. And of course, the third, besides improving the living standards of the people, increasing the productivity of the economy, the Chinese think that it's important to consolidate the governance system, that the state remains in control, not as a dictatorship, but to manage the policy. So when you have governments changing, the policy doesn't change. If the policy is good, the next government should pursue and continue that policy. Mm-hmm. And instead of firing all the people in the previous government and bringing in completely new people, we know how these things disrupt the progress of the economy. So these are three very important things to think about.
Exactly. Okay, if we talk strategically about the region, I know it's a bit specific about this area where we are residing. There were two major operations which happened in Pakistan and India when there was a war situation. Operation Sindoor from India and then Operation Bunyan-ul Marsoos from Pakistan. So after that, this war situation, the whole scenario of the region changed. What do you think that strategically Pakistan was far behind, I think, before the war? But after this war phase, where you think Pakistan is right now standing? And we obviously, I would like to know about India is being isolated now as compared to the previous era when India was considered as an Asian tiger. And there was a special connection or relation with US. And obviously, Pakistan was not having a good time in that phase. So what do you think that this war changed the scenario of the region, especially in relation to Pakistan and India?
Well, I think this war and also the war between Iran and Israel and the United States proved two things important. Is that one is that this idea of the superiority of Western weapons was broken. Exactly. Number two is that if you are efficient, like the Chinese in this famous book, The Art of War, Sun Tzu wrote, is that you have to be efficient and finish the war in the shortest possible with the least casualties as possible. And this is a very, very important strategically. And actually Pakistan achieved that and forced India to change its attitude. And now there's a interesting dialogue between India and China. India, they have to realize one thing. They have to look at the map and find where they are. You know, there's a question of geography. There's a question of history. India is part of the global South. It's inseparable. And there are structures like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization where India can resolve its issues with both Pakistan and China and others. India is not on the Atlantic Ocean. And this is something people in India have to realize. They are part of Asia. They are part of the global South. And the global South is rising. So there is this situation now where my hope is that it will be resolved in a diplomatic manner and that the economic integration of this whole region, Iran, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, Central Asia, this will be a very, very dynamic economic region. And then you have, of course, China in the background, because China's policy is to focus on South and West Asia and Central Asia. That's why they're making enormous investments in Xinjiang, in industrial and technological and infrastructure projects. And this is where Pakistan and India have to look, not at their differences, but where they can take advantage of this new situation. And I think the world is changing. The credibility of the West as a big supporter or as a friend has completely collapsed. I mean, morally, what happened in Gaza and the US and the many European countries' support for Israel has exposed them as unreliable. President Trump is the most unpredictable leader. You cannot rely on him because he changes his mind every day. And for any nation who want to have a future, they need to work with other nations who have a long-term plan, whom you can trust and rely on for long-term cooperation. So this is where the situation is. And I think Pakistan is in a very good position because of its long-term relationship with China. China is a trustworthy partner. India's reliance on Britain or the United States or Israel is precarious because they are not reliable partners. They only work for their own interest and not for their interest. So I hope Indian leaders will look at the map and realize that their future is in Asia and in the global South.
All right. You just talk about Mr. Trump. So I'd like to raise one more question about that. That after the Trump government, do you think that the two wars which you quoted, Iran, Israel, and then Pakistan and India war, do you think that the policies of the US have instantly changed after the arrival of Mr. Trump, or do you think that there is a consent of establishment also with Mr. Trump policies nowadays?
No, the establishment in the United States and in the English speaking, the Five Eyes, Britain, the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. There's this, what is called the Five Eyes. There's an establishment which has a permanent policy. No matter which president comes in, it seems that the same policies are applied because based on geopolitics and divide and conquer. So they have wanted to incorporate India into, for example, the Quad, or something which doesn't exist. It's called Indo-Pacific. There's no such a thing as Indo-Pacific. You have the Indian Ocean, you have the Pacific Ocean. But they created this notion to incorporate India in something which is artificial. That's where the problem is. And they are trying to give incentives to India to be part of that geopolitical game. And it's not in the interest of India. It's not in the interest of Australia. You see the Prime Minister of Australia is on a 6-day visit to China, and he's saying, look, we think about Australian interests, and our Australian interests are in cooperating with China, our biggest market and economic partner. So this is the new reality. That reality is not shaped by some ideology. It's shaped by economic realities. And India will be advised to think about this matter. And I think there is even inside India, there are people who understand that. And for example, India's relationship to Russia does not succumb to the pressure exerted by the West on India. India wants to continue working with Russia because it's beneficial for India. And this is where nations are looking now. So this is the new game. Nations look at for their interest and not the interest of others. And as I said, there's a long-term policy, but that long-term policy is based on a fantasy. It's not achievable without creating a world war. Defeating Russia, for example, you cannot defeat Russia without having a world war with nuclear weapons, thermonuclear weapons. You cannot defeat China without launching a global thermonuclear war. So these fantasies are dangerous. So even if Trump tried to change that reality, that policy in a way by rhetoric, he had to go back and play the same game as before. And this is very unfortunate. It's not in the interest of the United States. It's not in the interest of Europe to pursue this geopolitical game. It's much better to work together with China, with Russia, and other nations of the global South to create a new global economic order.
Exactly. Okay, last question, as you said about the Quad. So I would like to know about a little opinion about the BRICS and SCO. Do you think that considering Pakistan's role in BRICS and SCO, as Pakistan is actually working on growing its relation again or reviving its relation again with China and then moving ahead with Russia as well. So do you think that Pakistan can play an important role in the region for those important powers? And then obviously US has lost his interest, I think, on India. So do you think that US can also rely on Pakistan in the future if we consider their future arrival in Afghanistan?
Yes, I think the Pakistani leadership in many years now, they have exhibited a certain independence, although they have, ties to the United States from before. There is nothing wrong with having ties with the United States. The important thing is, what are the basis for these ties? Is it beneficial for Pakistan, or is it beneficial only for the geopolitical goals of the United States, like the participating in the 40-year Afghan war? It was not in the interest of Pakistan. But Pakistani leaders have shown a certain independence in recent years, and they say we have to think about our country. We are open for everyone, but based on our national interest. And I think this is a very good principle. Nobody can be angry with you because you care about your people. And therefore, Pakistan has a very important role to play internationally. And even especially in this current situation where we have the war on Iran, but it's because of the war on the Palestinian people and Gaza. Pakistan has been a very strong voice in defense of the people in Palestine, but it's based on principles. Pakistan's relation to Iran is improving, and there's a very good dialogue. Pakistan's relationship with Russia is strong. There are no problems there, but it has to be based on Pakistan's own interests. And I think in the global south, we have the BRIX, which is a growing new structure. It's not anti-Western, but since the West does not care about the global south nations, the BRICS nations have no other solution than to build their own system, which benefits their people, not only benefits the West. And therefore, and they have garnered the technological and economic strength to become independent of reliance on the West. It's an unfortunate situation, but that's the reality of things. Pakistan can connect and tap into this growing structure because it has both technological, economic, but also financial capabilities, like the new development bank. Now there will be a new platform for its investment. Pakistan, even as not a member in the BRICS, could also tap into the resources provided in that. And as we see that wealthy countries in the Gulf are joining the BRICS and adding more financial resources to that. So this is one idea. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a very interesting organization and structure, but it has so far been focused mostly on security matters, to resolve security issues, which is the purpose of that. But I think the Shanghai Cooperation Organization should develop into an economic structure and incorporate both the Belt and Road Initiative, and the Russian Eurasian Economic Union, and the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Iran, and even Turkey, to build a Eurasian economic structure which is waterproof, so to speak, which cannot be infiltrated by Western geopolitical games. And Pakistan can play a good role there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hussein Askary, for your time. He was the economic and strategy expert and also the co-founder and vice chairman of Belt and Road Institute, Sweden. He spoke very well about the CPEC and the importance of this economic corridor in the region. And thank you so much for your time, audience. Allah Hafiz.